Welcome back to Dream Retro, where we drift back to simpler times and relive the moments that shaped us. There was something about those double doors, you know the ones. They stood at the end of the hallway, always slightly different from every other door in the school. Maybe they were painted a particular shade of red or blue. Maybe they had those small rectangular windows with the chicken wire embedded in the glass. Maybe they were marked with scuff marks from thousands of sneakers and deflected balls. But whatever their appearance, those doors meant something. They were a threshold between the ordered world of desks and textbooks and something else entirely. A place where the rules changed, where your body mattered more than your mind, where social hierarchies could shift in an instant based on your ability to throw, catch, climb, or dodge. For some students, those doors represented freedom, a chance to move after sitting still for hours, to compete, to excel in ways the classroom never allowed. For others, they represented dread, a twice-weekly reminder of physical inadequacy, social vulnerability, or simply the uncomfortable reality of changing into shorts in front of your peers. But regardless of how you felt about what waited on the other side, those double doors held power. They separated gym class from everything else, marking it as a distinct experience that existed in its own world with its own language, its own heroes, its own triumphs and humiliations. The smell hit you first, even before you pushed through the doors. That particular combination of rubber, sweat, floor wax, and something indefinably industrial. It was a smell that would stay with you for decades, capable of transporting you back to childhood the instant you encountered it again in some other gymnasium, in some other time. The sound came next, the specific echo that only gymnasiums possess, where every voice, every squeak of a sneaker, every bounce of a ball became amplified and distorted, bouncing off the high ceilings and painted cinder block walls. And then you were inside, and the full reality of gym class surrounded you. The glossy wooden floor stretching out before you, marked with lines in different colors for different games. The climbing ropes hanging from impossibly high ceilings, still as hanging vines. The folded bleachers against the walls. The stage at one end, its heavy curtains closed. The basketball hoops at either end. And most importantly, the equipment closet. That treasure trove of possibility, where the teacher would emerge with whatever tool would define that day's experience. Gym class was universal, yet deeply personal. Almost everyone who attended American schools from the 1950s onward has memories of it. We shared similar experiences across decades and geography. The same games, the same equipment, often even the same rules. Yet each person's relationship with gym class was unique, shaped by their physical abilities, their social status, their particular teacher, their specific school. This is a journey back to that time, to the squeak of sneakers on polished wood, to the particular terror and joy of those days that stood apart from regular school, to the equipment and games that defined a generation's physical education. Physical education, as we know it, didn't always exist. In early American schools, children's physical activity was limited to recess and whatever play they engaged in before and after school. The idea that physical training should be part of formal education was a European import, and one that took hold slowly and unevenly across the United States. The foundations were laid in the early 19th century. In Germany, Friedrich Ludwig Jahn developed a system of gymnastics in the 1810s, that emphasized apparatus work: parallel bars, horizontal bars, balance beams, and vaulting horses. This German system focused on strength, discipline, and nationalistic pride. In Sweden, Per Henrik Ling developed a different approach in the 1830s, emphasizing free exercises, posture, and the therapeutic aspects of movement. The Swedish system was more concerned with health and medical benefits than with building strength for military purposes. These European systems arrived in America through immigrant communities and forward-thinking educators. The Round Hill School in Northampton, Massachusetts, introduced organized physical education in 1823, led by Charles Beck, a student of Jahn. Boston established the first public school gymnastics program in 1821, though it was short-lived. The movement gained momentum slowly. By the 1850s, several normal schools, teacher training institutions required physical education courses, ensuring that future teachers would understand its importance. The latter half of the 19th century saw physical education become more established, though still far from universal. The YMCA, founded in Boston in 1851, played a crucial role in promoting physical fitness and developing new sports and activities. Basketball was invented at a YMCA training school in 1891 by James Naismith, specifically to provide indoor winter exercise. Volleyball followed in 1895, invented by William G. Morgan, also at a YMCA. The early 20th century brought a significant shift. The poor physical condition of military recruits during World War I shocked the nation and led to calls for improved physical education in schools. Statistics showed that nearly 1/3 of draftees were rejected for physical deficiencies. This sparked a national movement to ensure that American children were physically fit, partly for their patriotic and military preparedness reasons, but also from growing understanding of health benefits. By the 1920s and 1930s, physical education became increasingly standardized and widespread. State legislatures began mandating physical education in public schools. The focus shifted somewhat from rigid calisthenics and military-style drills toward more varied activities, including sports, games, and recreational activities. This era saw the introduction of many of the games and activities that would become gym class staples: dodgeball, kickball, relay races, and simple team sports. World War II reinforced the connection between physical fitness and national strength. The post-war era saw continued expansion of physical education programs, with more schools building dedicated gymnasiums and hiring specialized PE teachers. The 1950s brought the President's Council on Youth Fitness. Established by Eisenhower in 1956, after studies showed American children were less fit than their European counterparts. This led to increased emphasis on physical education nationwide. The 1960s and 1970s represented perhaps the golden age of traditional gym class. By this time, dedicated physical education was nearly universal in American schools. The baby boom generation ensured large class sizes, and schools were investing in facilities and equipment. This era established many of the routines and rituals that older generations remember: mandatory participation, gender-separated classes, standardized uniforms, and a focus on competitive team sports alongside fitness activities. The equipment available expanded dramatically during this period. While earlier gym classes might have made do with a few balls and some ropes, post-war prosperity allowed schools to purchase a much wider array of equipment. Parachutes, originally developed for military use, were repurposed for children's games in the 1950s and became increasingly popular through the 1960s and 1970s. Scooter boards, which had existed in various forms for decades, were refined and mass-produced for educational use. Foam balls and safer equipment replaced some of the harder, more dangerous items from earlier eras. The late 1970s and 1980s brought new challenges. Budget cuts affected many schools' PE programs. The fitness craze of the era influenced curriculum, with more emphasis on aerobics, jogging, and personal fitness. Some schools reduced or eliminated competitive team sports in favor of lifetime fitness activities. The nature of childhood play was also changing, with increased emphasis on organized youth sports outside of school and the rise of video games and home entertainment competing for children's time and attention. Title IX, passed in 1972, had profound effects on physical education. It mandated equal opportunities for girls in all educational programs, including athletics and PE. This led to the end of gender-separated classes in many schools and changes to curriculum to ensure activities appeal to all students. The law gradually transformed physical education from a primarily male-focused, sports-centered program to one that theoretically offered equal opportunities and diverse activities. The 1990s and 2000s saw continued evolution. Growing concerns about childhood obesity led to renewed emphasis on physical education. Though many schools struggled with limited budgets and time, the No Child Left Behind Act of 2001, with its focus on standardized testing in core academic subjects, inadvertently led many schools to reduce PE time to make room for more math and reading instruction. Some schools cut PE programs entirely, while others reduced frequency from daily to once or twice per week. The equipment and activities of gym class also evolved to reflect changing times and attitudes. Dodgeball, once a staple, became controversial, with some schools banning it as too aggressive or exclusionary. New activities were introduced, often focused on individual achievement rather than team competition. Rock climbing walls, yoga, dance, cooperative games. The rope climb, once ubiquitous, disappeared from many gymnasiums, removed due to safety concerns or simply falling out of fashion. Modern physical education, when it exists, often looks quite different from the gym class of the mid-20th century. There's more emphasis on lifelong fitness skills, less on competitive team sports. Technology has entered the gymnasium, with fitness trackers, video game-based exercise systems, and online resources. The COVID-19 pandemic further disrupted physical education, with many classes moving online or being conducted outdoors with social distancing, fundamentally changing the shared, communal nature that defined gym class for generations. Yet despite all these changes, certain elements remain consistent across decades and continue in schools that still prioritize physical education. The basic equipment, balls, ropes, parachutes, still exists in equipment closets. Children still play versions of games that have been played for generations. The gymnasium, when schools still have them, remains a distinct space where the rules of regular school don't quite apply. where movement and physicality take precedence over sitting still and listening. Walk into any gym equipment closet from the 1960s through the 1990s, and you'd find a relatively standard collection of items. These weren't random choices. Each piece of equipment had its own history, its own origin story, its own evolution from other purposes to become a fixture of American physical education. The parachute, perhaps the most beloved piece of equipment for a generation of school children, began its life serving an entirely different purpose. Parachutes were developed for military use, with the first successful parachute jump from an airplane occurring in 1912. During World War II, parachute production increased dramatically as airborne troops became a standard part of military operations. After the war, surplus parachutes flooded the market, and creative educators saw their potential for children's play. The first documented use of parachutes in physical education appears in the 1950s, though the practice likely began informally earlier. By the 1960s, physical education suppliers began manufacturing parachutes specifically for school use. Smaller than military versions, made with brighter colors and constructed from lighter materials suitable for children to handle. These educational parachutes typically measured 12 to 30 feet in diameter and came in rainbow colors, with handles sewn around the perimeter for easy gripping. The genius of the parachute was its versatility. It could be used for cooperative games where everyone had to work together, making the mushroom shaking off balls, creating waves. It accommodated large groups, required no special athletic ability, and was inherently fun. The parachute democratized gym class in a way few other activities could, allowing the most and least athletic students to participate equally. Its introduction to schools coincided with new educational theories emphasizing cooperation over competition, making it a perfect fit for evolving physical education philosophy. Jump ropes had a much longer history in children's play, dating back centuries across multiple cultures. The activity of rope jumping appears in ancient Chinese, Egyptian, and medieval European art and texts in America. Jump rope became a popular children's game in the 19th century, particularly among girls in urban areas who developed elaborate rhymes and patterns to accompany their jumping. The activity's formalization into physical education happened gradually through the early 20th century. What changed in the post-war era was the standardization and commercialization of jump ropes for school use. Rather than children using whatever rope was available, schools purchased sets of uniform jump ropes in appropriate lengths for different ages. The long ropes for group jumping, often called double Dutch ropes when two were used simultaneously, and individual ropes of various lengths became standard equipment. The introduction of plastic and vinyl materials in the 1950s and 1960s created more durable, weather-resistant ropes that lasted longer than traditional rope fibers. Hula hoops exploded onto the scene in 1958, when Wham-O began mass-producing them, though children had been playing with similar hoops for centuries. The hula hoop craze of 1958 to 1959 was one of the most intense toy fads of the 20th century, with an estimated 100 million hoops sold in the first year. While the general public's obsession faded after a year or two, hula hoops found a permanent home in physical education programs. They were inexpensive, virtually indestructible, required no special skills to use at a basic level, and could be incorporated into various games and activities beyond simple waist hooping. Scooter boards, those flat platforms on 4 wheels that children would sit or lie on and propel themselves across the gym floor, evolved from furniture dollies and mechanics creepers. The earliest educational scooter boards appeared in the 1950s, but they became widely popular in school gymnasiums during the 1960s and 1970s. Early versions were simple wooden platforms with metal wheels. But by the 1970s, manufacturers were producing plastic boards with safer, smoother rolling plastic wheels and sometimes handles on the sides. The appeal of scooter boards was visceral. The sensation of gliding across the smooth gym floor, the slight danger of picking up speed, the creative ways children would propel and steer themselves. They were used for relay races, tag games, and creative movement activities. Teachers loved them because they were simple, required minimal setup, and kept children engaged. However, the same qualities that made them fun also made them somewhat dangerous, with pinched fingers and collisions being common. Modern versions include improved safety features, though many schools have eliminated them entirely. Climbing ropes descended directly from military and naval training. Sailors had climbed ropes as part of their work for centuries, and military training adopted rope climbing as a test of upper body strength and determination. This military connection made rope climbing a natural fit for early physical education, which often emphasized military-style discipline and fitness. When gymnasiums began to be built in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, climbing ropes became a standard fixture, usually anchored to the ceiling and hanging the full height of the gymnasium. The traditional gym rope was thick manila rope, typically 1.5 to 2 inches in diameter and 18 to 25 feet long, hanging from a ceiling mount. Some gymnasiums had multiple ropes, allowing races or group activities. The rope often had knots tied at intervals to provide grips. Though purists insisted on climbing unknotted ropes, by the mid-20th century, synthetic ropes began to replace manila, lasting longer and providing more consistent texture and strength. Rope climbing served multiple purposes in physical education. It was an objective test of strength. You could either reach the top or you couldn't. It built upper body and grip strength, developed determination and courage, and provided a clear goal that students could work toward over time. The rope climb was also somewhat democratic. While athletic students might find it easier, a lighter, less athletic student with good technique and determination could sometimes outperform larger, stronger peers. However, rope climbing fell out of favor in many schools by the 1980s and 1990s. Safety concerns played a role, as falls from ropes could result in serious injuries. The activity was also seen as potentially humiliating for students who couldn't climb, making it incompatible with newer educational philosophies, emphasizing inclusion and self-esteem. Many schools removed their climbing ropes, and new gymnasiums often weren't designed with the ceiling structure necessary to support them. Dodgeballs, kickballs, and playground balls were the workhorses of gym class, used for dozens of different games and activities. The classic red rubber playground ball, often called a utility ball or just playground ball, descended from early rubber balls produced in the 19th century after Charles Goodyear developed vulcanized rubber in 1839. These balls were inexpensive, durable, and versatile, making them perfect for schools. The term dodgeball, to describe the game, appears in American texts in the early 20th century, though ball-throwing games existed much earlier. The classic 8.5-inch red rubber ball became synonymous with dodgeball through the mid-20th century, though schools also used larger playground balls, 13 inches or more, for gentler versions and smaller balls for different variations. In the 1980s and 1990s, foam balls began to replace rubber balls in many schools, reducing the sting of impact and decreasing injury risk. Kickballs followed a similar trajectory. The game of kickball, essentially baseball played with a large rubber ball that players kick instead of hit, evolved in the early 20th century. The playground ball, manufactured by Parker Brothers and other companies, became the standard kickball, typically 10 to 16 inches in diameter, made of red rubber, inflated to the right bounce for both kicking and catching. The game's rules were formalized in the 1940s and 1950s, and by the 1960s, kickball was a staple of both physical education and recess. Basketball and basketball hoops were gymnasium fixtures from early in the sport's history. James Naismith invented basketball in 1891, using peach baskets as goals. But the game quickly evolved to use metal hoops with netting. Early gymnasiums installed permanent basketball equipment, and the standardization of court dimensions and hoop heights made basketball a natural fit for physical education. Schools might not have football fields or baseball diamonds, but almost any gymnasium could accommodate basketball. Volleyballs and volleyball nets were similarly standard, given volleyball's invention specifically for gymnasium use. The sport required minimal equipment, a ball, a net, and a defined court. Making it perfect for schools, volleyball could accommodate varying skill levels, didn't require the same physical contact as many sports, and could be played by mixed gender groups, making it popular as gym classes became coeducational. Less glamorous but equally important were the cones, markers, and lines that defined gym class space. Plastic cones in bright colors, orange, red, yellow, were used to mark boundaries, create obstacle courses, define teams' territories, and designate where students should stand or sit. These simple tools allowed teachers to quickly transform the gymnasium into whatever configuration the day's activity required. Other equipment varied by school and era, but might include gymnastics apparatus, balance beams, vaulting horses, tumbling mats, exercise equipment, pull-up bars, sit-up stations, striking implements, plastic bats, hockey sticks, rackets, and various balls for specific sports, soccer balls, footballs, tennis balls. The presence and condition of equipment often reflected the school's budget and administration's priorities. Well-funded schools had equipment closets full of options. Struggling schools made do with the basics. The games played in gym class weren't just random activities. They were traditions passed down through generations of physical educators, refined over decades, with rules and variations that could spark heated debates among players. These games formed a shared cultural experience, a common language of childhood that transcended individual schools or regions. Dodgeball stood as perhaps the king of gym class games, loved by some and dreaded by others with equal intensity. The basic premise was simple. Two teams, separated by a center line, throwing balls at opponents while trying to avoid being hit. Yet within this simple framework existed dozens of variations, each with passionate adherents. Traditional dodgeball allowed players to be hit anywhere on the body, sometimes including the head. sometimes explicitly excluding it. Being hit meant elimination. You sat out for the remainder of the game, often on bleachers or against the wall, watching your remaining teammates struggle. Some versions included a jail, where eliminated players waited until their team caught a ball, earning a jailbreak that returned eliminated players to the game. This variation at least offered hope of return, rather than definitive elimination. The catch rule added strategic depth. If you caught a ball thrown at you before it touched the ground, the thrower was out, not you. This rule rewarded quick reflexes and courage. Players who aggressively caught throws rather than dodging became heroes. Some variations allowed catching a ball to bring an eliminated teammate back into the game, adding an element of rescue and redemption. Civil War Dodgeball eliminated the center line, with both teams sharing the entire court in a chaotic free-for-all. Team members had to work together to protect each other, while eliminating opponents' British Bulldog, sometimes called California Kickball when played with kicking instead of running, had one team on each end of the gym and Bulldogs in the middle trying to tag runners as they attempted to cross. Once tagged, runners became Bulldogs, leading to a gradually shrinking group of survivors and a growing pack of pursuers. The controversy around dodgeball emerged in the 1990s and intensified in the 2000s. Critics argued it was fundamentally exclusionary, allowing stronger, more athletic students to dominate and humiliate weaker ones. The human target aspect was seen as promoting aggression and bullying. Several schools banned dodgeball, and some physical educators advocated for its elimination from curriculum. Defenders countered that dodgeball taught quick thinking, teamwork, and resilience, and that modifications could address concerns while preserving the game's benefits. Kickball offered a more structured, less controversial alternative to dodgeball, while still providing excitement and competition. The game essentially translated baseball to gym class, a diamond with bases, one team kicking and running, the other fielding and throwing. The large rubber balls made the game accessible even to students who struggled with hitting a baseball, and the running and fielding involved gave everyone a role to play. Pitcher-catcher dynamics in kickball created mini-dramas within the larger game. A skilled pitcher could roll the ball with just the right speed and placement. To make kicking difficult, catchers had to be quick to field balls kicked toward them, and brave enough to face balls kicked directly at them. Base runners employed strategies from baseball, leading off, tagging up, stealing bases when they thought they could make it. The most dramatic kickball moments came from decisive plays. A runner trying to stretch a single into a double, a fielder making a diving catch, a close play at home plate. Unlike dodgeball, where skilled players could individually dominate, kickball required team coordination. The worst kicker on the team still had to be pitched to, and one good kick at a crucial moment could shift the game's momentum. Foursquare reigned supreme as a recess game, but occasionally made its way into gym class, particularly in schools with suitable outdoor or multi-purpose spaces. The game required only a large ball and a court divided into 4 squares, numbered 1 through 4, or king, queen, prince, jack in some versions. One player stood in each square, and the player in the highest ranked square served the ball by bouncing it in their own square, and then hitting it into another square. The receiving player had to let the ball bounce once in their square, and then hit it into another square. If a player hit the ball out of bounds, failed to return it, or allowed it to bounce twice in their square, they were eliminated. A line of waiting players stood outside the court, and when someone was eliminated, the lowest ranked player moved up, a new player entered the lowest square, and the eliminated player went to the end of the line. 4 squares' appeal lay in its combination of skill, strategy, and social dynamics. The king could target weak players to eliminate them quickly, or engage in elaborate volleys with the queen's special moves, and house rules proliferated. Underhand tricks, double bounces, spinning serves, various no rules, no tea parties, no baby bounces, no cherry bombs. Arguments about rules and whether particular moves were legal were part of the game's culture. Capture the Flag transformed the gymnasium, or outdoor field, into a battleground where strategy mattered as much as speed. 2 teams, 2 territories, 2 flags, often just colored cones or jerseys. The goal: infiltrate the opponent's territory, capture their flag, and return it to your own side without being tagged. If tagged in enemy territory, you went to jail, usually a designated corner or circle, and waited until a teammate could free you by running into the jail without being tagged. The game rewarded diverse skills and strategies. Fast runners made excellent flag runners, attempting quick raids. Strong defenders guarded the flag and jail. Crafty players waited for distractions and then made calculated moves. The team aspect was crucial. Coordinated attacks, sacrificial runs to free jailed teammates, defensive formations. Games could last entire class periods, with momentum shifting as key players were captured or freed. Red Rover, though it fell out of favor in many schools due to safety concerns, was a staple of an earlier era. 2 teams formed lines, holding hands tightly. One team called, Red Rover, send name right over. The named player from the opposite team ran toward the calling team's line and tried to break through a linked pair of hands. Success meant the runner could choose one person from the broken link to return to their team. Failure meant the runner joined the calling team. The game continued until one team had captured all players from the other. The appeal was straightforward: pure physical challenge combined with social selection. Being called meant your team thought you strong enough to break through. Successfully breaking through earned bragging rights. The game's problem, which led to its decline, was the injury potential. Runners sometimes hurt themselves colliding with linked arms, and the hand-holding itself could lead to injuries as players strained to maintain their grip. Duck, Duck, Goose represented the gentler side of gym class games, particularly popular with younger children, but occasionally used with older students as a warm-up or cool-down activity. Players sat in a circle, while one player, the picker, walked around the outside, tapping each seated player on the head while saying, "Duck." Eventually, the picker would tap someone and say, "Goose," and that person had to jump up and chase the picker around the circle. If the picker made it around and sat in the goose's spot without being tagged, the goose became the new picker. If tagged, the picker had to try again. The game's simplicity made it almost universal in elementary physical education. It required no equipment, accommodated any number of players, and gave everyone a turn being the picker. The suspense of waiting to be picked as the goose, the moment of selection, the chase around the circle. These simple pleasures worked for generations of children. Relay races provided structured competition with built-in fairness. Teams lined up and one member at a time completed a task, running to a cone and back, dribbling a basketball, balancing a beanbag on their head, doing a wheelbarrow walk with a partner, before tagging the next person in line. The variety was endless, limited only by the teacher's imagination and available equipment. The appeal was democratic. Everyone got a turn, everyone contributed equally, and theoretically, everyone's effort mattered the same. Relay races could also be adapted to accommodate different ability levels, with easier tasks given to less physically capable students. The team aspect meant that even if you weren't the fastest, you weren't letting down just yourself, but your teammates, creating social pressure that motivated effort. Within the regular routine of gym class, a few times per week, following the year's curriculum, moving through various sports and activities, certain days stood out as special. These weren't just ordinary gym class days. They were events, anticipated for days or weeks in advance, remembered for years afterward. Parachute day, scooter day, rope climbing day. These weren't just activities but experiences that broke the routine's monotony and offered something different, something purely fun. Parachute day topped most students' lists of favorite gym days. Unlike competitive activities where some students excelled while others struggled, the parachute was inherently cooperative. Everyone held handles around the perimeter, and success depended on everyone working together. This leveled the playing field in a way few other activities did. The natural klutz who got picked last for dodgeball could be just as important during parachute activities as the star athlete. Teachers loved parachute days partly because they solved the perennial problem of how to engage an entire class simultaneously in a way that was active, fun, and didn't result in half the students sitting on bleachers waiting for a turn with a parachute. 30 students could all participate at once, all contributing equally. The equipment itself was also forgiving. No complex rules to learn, no sophisticated skills to develop. Just grab a handle and follow instructions. The activities themselves varied but followed certain patterns. Making the mushroom was almost always first. Everyone holding the parachute at waist height, then lifting it together on the count of 3, watching as it filled with air and billowed upward, creating a colorful dome. Sometimes everyone would step underneath, while the parachute was high, and sit on its edges, trapping the air inside and creating a multicolored tent inside the mushroom. Voices echoed strangely. Light filtered through the colored fabric, and for a moment, the gymnasium disappeared, replaced by this temporary magical space. Ball games were standard parachute activities, a ball or several balls placed on top of the parachute, everyone shaking it to make the balls bounce and roll. Sometimes the goal was to shake the balls off, sometimes it was to keep them on. Often teams competed, with half trying to shake the ball off one side, while the other half tried to shake it off the opposite side. The game required no particular skill, just enthusiasm and effort, and the chaotic bouncing of the balls combined with the colorful, moving parachute created visual spectacle alongside physical activity. Other variations included cat and mouse, where one student crawled under the parachute while everyone else made waves, trying to hide them from another student on top, trying to catch them. Popcorn involved placing dozens of smaller balls on the parachute and shaking it violently to make them pop like popcorn kernels. Merry-go-round had everyone holding the parachute and walking or running in a circle, creating a spinning carousel effect. The special quality of Parachute Day wasn't just the activity itself, but what it represented: a break from competition and judgment. There were no winners or losers, no one getting picked last, no humiliation of being the first one out. The parachute offered pure, uncomplicated fun, and that rarity in gym class, an activity where everyone, regardless of athletic ability, could participate equally and enjoy themselves. Scooter board day generated similar excitement, but for entirely different reasons. Where the parachute was cooperative and gentle, scooters were individualistic and thrilling. The appeal was visceral and immediate. The sensation of gliding across the smooth gymnasium floor, the slight danger of picking up speed, the freedom of movement in all directions. Scooters tapped into something primal, the desire for speed and motion that makes children love slides, swings, and roller coasters. Teachers approached Scooter Day with a mix of enthusiasm and apprehension. Students loved scooters, which meant high engagement and excitement. But scooters also meant noise, the rumble of plastic wheels on wood floors, the inevitable crashes, the squeals of excitement. They meant chaos, with 30 students wheeling around the gymnasium in unpredictable patterns, and they meant injuries. Pinched fingers where scooters collided, scraped knees from falls, the occasional more serious collision. The activities varied by teacher creativity and risk tolerance. Some teachers organized structured relay races with students propelling themselves from one end of the gym to the other using only their hands, lying on their stomachs on the boards. Others created obstacle courses with cones to weave through and lines to follow. Some teachers allowed scooter hockey, using plastic sticks and pucks while seated or lying on the scooters. The most permissive teachers occasionally allowed brief periods of free play, where students could scooter however they wanted, though this usually devolved into crashes and chaos within minutes. The techniques for scooter propulsion became a matter of personal style. Some students lay on their stomachs, using their hands to pull themselves forward. Others sat cross-legged and used their hands to push. The brave or foolish lay on their backs, seeing only the ceiling while propelling themselves with the hand pushes. Some students developed impressive skills, spinning in circles, traveling backwards, even attempting tricks like lifting the front wheels. Scooter Day represented controlled chaos, a sanctioned opportunity for behavior that would never be allowed in regular classroom settings. It was loud, fast, and slightly dangerous, all qualities that made it appealing to children and slightly nerve-wracking for teachers. The fact that it couldn't happen every day was part of what made it special. Scooter Day was a treat, an occasional event that stood out precisely because of its rarity. Rope climbing day evoked different emotions depending on the student. For some, it was an opportunity to demonstrate strength and courage, a chance to shine in a way that math tests and spelling bees didn't allow. For others, it was dreaded, a public test of physical ability that seemed designed to highlight inadequacy. Unlike team games where you could hide in the group or be carried by stronger teammates, the rope climb was individual, public, and unforgiving. You could either make it to the top or you couldn't, and everyone could see which category you fell into. Teachers approached rope climbing with varying philosophies. Some treated it as a test, with clear expectations about how high students should climb. Others focused on personal improvement, encouraging students to climb higher than they had before without comparing them to classmates. The best teachers managed to make the rope climb challenging without humiliating those who struggled, celebrating effort and progress rather than absolute achievement. The preparation for rope climbing included instruction on technique, using feet to grip the rope and legs to support body weight, rather than relying solely on arm strength. The proper technique involved wrapping the rope around one foot, clamping it with the other foot, standing up on that foothold while reaching higher with the hands, then repeating the process. Students who mastered this technique could climb efficiently. Those who relied on arm strength alone rarely made it far before exhausting themselves. Safety protocols varied, but typically included mats beneath the ropes and rules about not climbing too high without teacher permission. Some schools use safety belts or spotters, particularly for students attempting to reach the ceiling. The height itself was part of the rope's intimidation, 20 feet or more from floor to ceiling, with nothing but air beneath you as you climbed. Looking down from even halfway up could be terrifying for the height averse. The rope burn was an inevitable consequence of rope climbing, particularly for beginners who hadn't mastered the foot grip technique and relied too heavily on sliding their hands along the rope. The burn appeared as red, irritated skin on palms and inner hands, sometimes progressing to actual blisters if the grip and slide were severe enough. It was a badge of honor of sorts, proof of effort, though a painful one. Success in rope climbing brought genuine pride. Reaching the top meant something, particularly for students who didn't often excel in gym class. The view from the ceiling was remarkable. The gymnasium spread out below, classmates looking small, the perspective entirely different. Touching the ceiling or ringing the bell that some teachers hung at the top represented a concrete achievement, something that couldn't be disputed or relativized. You made it, or you didn't. Other specialized days existed depending on the school and teacher. Gymnastics Day brought out mats, balance beams, and vaulting equipment, allowing students to practice tumbling, cartwheels, and other movements they wouldn't attempt on the regular gym floor. Square dancing units, mandatory in some states' physical education curriculum, transformed the gymnasium with recorded music and caller instructions, teaching do-si-dos and allemande lefts to students who range from enthusiastic to mortified. Field day, if it can be called a day in the same sense, represented the ultimate special event, an entire day devoted to outdoor activities, competitions, and celebration. Different schools approached field day differently, but common elements included relay races, tug-of-war, three-legged races, egg and spoon races, and various throwing and jumping competitions. Field day often marked the end of the school year, a celebratory culmination of physical education for the year. The combination of outdoor setting, all-day duration, and special nature made field day memorable in ways that regular gym class rarely achieved. The specialness of these days came partly from their rarity. If every day were parachute day, it wouldn't be special. The anticipation built over days or weeks, with students asking teachers when the next parachute day or scooter day would be. The memory lasted long after, with students recounting particularly fun moments or impressive achievements. These special days broke the routine, offered something different, and created shared experiences that became part of the class's collective memory. But facts and history and descriptions of activities only tell part of the story. To really understand gym class, to remember it fully, you have to go back to the experience itself, to the physical sensations and emotions that define those days. Close your eyes for a moment and try to remember. Not what you did in gym class, but what it felt like. The texture, the temperature, the sounds, the smells, the anticipation or dread in your stomach as you walk down the hallway, the particular quality of light in the gymnasium, the feeling of your gym shoes on your feet. It started in the classroom, or in the hallway when the teacher announced it was time for gym, or when you checked the schedule and saw that next period meant physical education. That announcement triggered different reactions in different students. Some felt excitement, an eagerness to move after sitting still for hours, to compete, to play. Others felt dread, their stomachs tightening at the prospect of another period of physical inadequacy on public display, of being picked last, of failing at some activity that seemed to come so easily to others. The walk to the gymnasium or to the locker rooms first, if your school had them, had its own particular quality. The gymnasium was rarely right next to the regular classrooms. It occupied its own space, often at the end of a long hallway or in a separate building entirely. The journey there felt like a transition between worlds. The hallway leading to the gym often looked different, wider maybe, to accommodate the traffic of entire classes moving at once. The doors marking territory were heavier, with different hardware, often with those small windows reinforced with chicken wire. If your school had locker rooms, the changing process was its own ordeal. The smell hit you first. That particular combination of mildew, old sweat, industrial cleaner, and something metallic from the lockers themselves. The lockers lined the walls in rows, their green or grey paint chipped and scratched, covered in graffiti despite periodic repainting. The benches between the rows were worn smooth by decades of students sitting to change their shoes. The vulnerability of changing clothes in front of classmates couldn't be understated, particularly during middle school years, when bodies were changing and self-consciousness peaked. Some students changed quickly and efficiently, unself-conscious, or at least appearing so. Others performed elaborate maneuvers to maintain modesty, changing shirts while keeping another shirt on temporarily, or facing their lockers while changing. The gym uniform itself, whether the classic combination of coloured shirt and shorts, or later variations, marked you as a gym class participant, removing the identity and expression that regular clothes provided. The sounds in the locker room created a particular acoustic environment. Voices echoed off tile and metal, conversations bouncing around the space. Locker doors clanged as they opened and closed. Shoes dropped onto benches with hollow thuds, the squeak of sneakers on the slightly damp floor. Occasionally, the sound of running water from the showers in the next room. Though by the 1980s and 1990s, many schools had stopped requiring post-gym showering except after swimming. Then came the moment of entering the gymnasium itself. Those double doors, push-bar handles cold under your hands. The doors swung open, and you stepped across the threshold into that distinctive space. The smell enveloped you immediately, that gymnasium smell that's instantly recognizable yet hard to describe precisely. Part rubber from the balls and mats, part floor wax or polish on the wooden floor, the kind that made it gleam under the fluorescent lights, part old sweat absorbed into wood and fabric over decades, part the industrial cleaning products used to maintain the space. Together, these scents combined into an aroma that meant gymnasium to anyone who'd spent time in one. The sound environment changed dramatically from the hallway or locker room. The gym's acoustics were unlike anywhere else in the school. The high ceiling, the hard surfaces, wooden floor, painted cinder block walls, bleachers, created an echo that amplified and distorted every sound. A conversation at normal volume became loud, voices bouncing off walls and ceiling. A ball bouncing on the floor produced a sharp, resonant sound that repeated itself in diminishing echoes. Sneakers squeaking on the polished floor created that distinctive gymnasium soundtrack. Each quick direction change or stop producing a squeal that hung in the air. The temperature varied depending on the season and the school's climate control, but gymnasiums tended toward extremes. In winter, they might be cold, particularly during the first few minutes before activity warmed you up. In late spring and early fall, they could be stifling, the sun beating through high windows and the space heating up like a greenhouse. The air felt different too, drier somehow, with a slight dustiness, despite the janitor's efforts. The light in the gymnasium had a particular quality. If there were windows, they were usually high up, near the ceiling, with sunlight streaming down at steep angles, creating dramatic beams visible in the dusty air. The fluorescent lights in their cages mounted high above cast a flat, even illumination that eliminated shadows, making everything visible with harsh clarity. This lighting was practical. No dark corners, no glare that might affect play. But it also gave the space a somewhat institutional feeling, emphasizing that this was a functional space designed for activity, not comfort. The floor stretched out before you, marked with lines in different colors. Red lines for basketball courts, blue lines for volleyball courts, yellow or white lines for other games and activities. These overlapping courts created a geometric pattern, a palimpsest of different games and activities, all sharing the same space. The floor itself was usually beautifully maintained, polished to a high gloss that reflected the overhead lights. The wood had a particular feel under your shoes, smooth, slightly slick, with just enough grip to allow quick movements without slipping. Running on that floor felt different from running on pavement or grass, faster, smoother, but also less forgiving if you fell. The walls were typically painted cinder block, usually in institutional colors, beige, cream, pale green, or that particular shade of yellow that appeared in the schools, built in certain decades. The walls often displayed various items, banners with school colors and mascots, championship plaques if the school's teams had won anything, motivational posters about teamwork and effort, safety rules for equipment use. The walls also bore the marks of countless balls bouncing off them, slight discoloration and wear where balls had struck thousands of times. The bleachers occupied one or both long sides of the gymnasium, folded against the walls when not in use, pulled out for basketball games and assemblies. When folded, they created vertical stripes of different colored wood or metal. When extended, they provided seating for spectators, but also served other purposes in gym class. A place to sit if you were eliminated from a game, if you were injured, if you weren't participating that day. Sitting on the bleachers had its own sensory experience. The hard wood or metal under you, the slight give as the structure shifted with weight, the view of the gym from elevated height. The equipment closet occupied a special place in the gymnasium's geography. Usually, a large door in one of the walls, sometimes more than one, open to reveal the treasure trove of equipment. The closet itself was deep and dark, stuffed full of balls, ropes, cones, nets, mats, and all the other paraphernalia of physical education. The smell from the equipment closet was concentrated gymnasium smell, rubber and plastic and fabric all stored together. accumulating scent over time. When the teacher opened that door to retrieve equipment for the day's activity, students often crowded around, trying to see what would be used, anticipating based on what the teacher pulled out. The stage at one end of the gymnasium, if the gym had one, as many did, serving as both gymnasium and auditorium, was usually closed off during gym class, its heavy curtains drawn. But those curtains represented possibility, a hidden space that figured in games of hide and seek or tag when teachers allowed it, or that students imagined exploring during less structured activities. This was the environment of gym class, the stage on which all the activities played out. And while the games and exercises themselves varied, this space remained constant. The smells, the sounds, the particular quality of light and air and floor beneath your feet. Your body responded to this environment even before activity began. Your heartbeat might quicken slightly, whether from excitement or apprehension. Your awareness shifted from the mental focus required in academic classes to a more physical, bodily awareness. You became conscious of your body in space, of your capabilities and limitations, in ways that sitting at a desk reading or writing never demanded. Of all the special days in gym class, Parachute Day deserves particular attention because it created such a complete sensory experience. From the moment you saw the teacher pulling the parachute out of the equipment closet, everything about the class changed. The parachute itself was enormous from a child's perspective, particularly if you were in elementary school. Folded and stuffed into its storage bag, it didn't look like much, just a bulging canvas or nylon sack. But when the teacher began pulling it out, the fabric seemed endless, yards and yards of colorful material emerging from the bag, like a magician's infinite scarf. The colors were brilliant: red, blue, yellow, green, orange, purple, arranged in wedges radiating from the center like a giant pie chart or a color wheel come to life. The first time the teacher spread the parachute out on the gymnasium floor, its sheer size became apparent. 20 or 30 feet in diameter, it covered a significant portion of the gym floor. The fabric lay there like a giant blanket or a landing pad for some colorful spacecraft. Even before you touched it, you could see the handles sewn around the perimeter, loops of webbing in different colors, one for each person who would hold the parachute. Finding your spot around the parachute's edge had a ritualistic quality. The teacher assigned positions or let students choose, spacing everyone evenly around the circumference. You'd walk to your spot, find your handle, and stand there waiting for the activity to begin. There was something communal about this arrangement. Everyone in a circle, facing inward, all equal distance from the center, all preparing to participate in the same shared activity. The moment you gripped your handle was the moment the experience truly began. The handle itself was substantial, made of webbing or reinforced fabric, thick enough to grip easily. The material had a particular texture, not quite rough, but with enough texture to provide grip. Some handles showed the wear from years of use, slightly frayed at the edges, softer than newer ones. Gripping that handle connected you physically to the parachute and, through it, to everyone else holding handles around the circle. The fabric of the parachute itself had a distinctive feel and smell. Most parachutes were made of nylon or similar synthetic material, lightweight but strong. The texture was smooth but not slippery, with a slight ripstop pattern visible up close. The fabric had absorbed years of use, slight dirt or dust despite cleaning, the smell of storage, a hint of mildew if the parachute had ever been used in damp conditions, but mostly it smelled like plastic and synthetic fabric, a clean, industrial smell that mixed with the gymnasium's general aroma. The first activity was almost always making the mushroom. The teacher explained the process. Everyone holding the parachute at waist height, the parachute spread out flat like a tablecloth. Then, on the count of 3, everyone would lift together, raising the parachute up high as you could reach. The instruction was simple, but the execution required coordination and timing. 1, 2, 3. 30 pairs of arms lifted simultaneously, and the parachute rose. As it lifted, it caught air, the fabric billowing upward and outward. The transformation was remarkable. What had been a flat circle of fabric suddenly became a dome, a hemisphere of color swelling above you. The colors swirled as the fabric moved, red blending into orange, blue into purple. The parachute filled with air like a sail catching wind, and for a moment, it floated above you. This massive, colorful structure that hadn't existed a second before. The sound of the parachute lifting was distinctive. A rush of air, a flutter of fabric, almost like a giant bird's wings flapping. The fabric made a snapping sound as it reached full extension, the air pressure inside pressing outward against the material. You could feel the pull on the handles as the air tried to lift the parachute even higher, the tension in the fabric transmitting through the handles to your hands and arms. Watching the mushroom form from underneath was mesmerizing. The colors overhead shifted and moved, creating patterns. Light filtered through the translucent fabric, tinting everything with colored hues. If you looked across at classmates on the opposite side, you saw them through the veil of fabric, their features distorted and colored by the material. The dome created a temporary ceiling, lower than the gymnasium's actual ceiling, a colorful canopy that transformed the space. The mushroom lasted only moments before gravity and air pressure began to collapse it. The dome sank slowly, the fabric descending back toward the ground. Sometimes the teacher instructed everyone to step forward while the parachute was high, then pull the fabric down and sit on its edges, trapping air inside to create an enclosed space. This variation transformed the mushroom into a tent or igloo, with everyone sitting on the outside edge holding the fabric down while the trapped air kept the center portion inflated above you. Being inside the mushroom tent was a unique experience. The colored fabric enclosed you, creating a separate space within the gymnasium. The light that penetrated the fabric was tinted by the colors, bathing everything in strange hues. Sounds echoed differently under the parachute. Voices bouncing off the fabric overhead. The air felt different, slightly warmer, pressurized, separate from the gym's air. The space felt intimate, despite having 30 people in it, as if the parachute created a boundary between the group inside and the world outside. The trapped air slowly leaked out through gaps and the fabric's porosity, and the mushroom tent gradually deflated. The fabric sank lower, eventually settling onto heads and shoulders. The sensation of the parachute draping over you was soft and enveloping, the lightweight fabric resting gently across your head and back. The colors, seen from inside with the fabric against you, became even more vibrant. Then the teacher would instruct everyone to stand and lift, releasing the remaining air, and the parachute would lift away, returning to its flat position for the next activity. Ball games with the parachute created different sensations. The teacher placed one or more balls on top of the parachute, usually playground balls of various sizes, with everyone holding the parachute at waist height. The instruction was to make waves, shaking the parachute up and down to make the balls bounce and roll. The coordination required was minimal, but the effect was maximum chaos and fun. As everyone shook their section of the parachute, waves rippled across the fabric. The balls bounced unpredictably, sometimes high into the air, sometimes rolling along valleys in the fabric, sometimes nearly escaping over the edge, only to roll back toward the center. The colors of the parachute combined with the ball's movement created a kaleidoscope effect, everything moving and shifting. The sound was a combination of fabric flapping, balls bouncing on the material, and students laughing and shouting. The physical sensation of shaking the parachute was satisfying. You could feel the weight and momentum of the fabric, the resistance as you pulled it up, the way it wanted to sink when you released. Your arms got a workout, particularly as the activity continued for several minutes. The movement was repetitive but not boring. You adjusted constantly based on where the balls were, trying to make them bounce toward the center or trying to shake them off the edge, depending on the game's objective. Competitive versions divided the group into teams, with half trying to shake the ball off one side and half trying to shake it off the opposite side. This created opposing forces, with waves moving in different directions, the parachute becoming a battlefield where physics and enthusiasm determined victory. The ball would roll one way, and that team would cheer, thinking they were winning, only to have the ball roll back the other direction after a particularly vigorous shake from the opposite side. Multiple balls increased the chaos exponentially. With 3 or 4 or 5 balls on the parachute, there was no tracking them all. They bounced and rolled independently, occasionally colliding in mid-air, creating unpredictable trajectories. The activity became purely about effort and energy, rather than strategy. Just shake vigorously and hope your side's collective shaking had more effect than the opposing side's. Cat and mouse introduced an element of pursuit and hiding to parachute activities. One student was the mouse, crawling underneath the parachute in the space between the fabric and the floor. Everyone else made waves with the parachute, creating a moving canopy that hopefully concealed the mouse's location. Another student, the cat, stood on top of the parachute and tried to locate and catch the mouse through the fabric by feeling or seeing bumps and movements underneath. Being the mouse meant crawling on the gym floor under the moving fabric, trying to stay quiet and still when the cat was nearby. Scrambling to new locations when you thought you'd been spotted. The space under the parachute was disorienting. The colored fabric moving above you, blocking your view of the gym. The sounds muffled and echoing strangely. The floor was hard under your hands and knees, and you had to navigate by feel as much as sight, avoiding collisions with the center of the parachute or the edges where students held the fabric down. The sensation of being under the moving parachute was unique, like being under a very large, very active blanket. The fabric occasionally touched your back or head as it descended during waves, a soft brushing sensation. The air moved with the fabric, creating breezes that stirred your hair. You could see shadows and shapes through the fabric, the cat moving above, your classmates around the edges making the waves, the gymnasium lights creating strange patterns through the colored material. Being the cat meant standing on the parachute, which felt precarious and strange. The fabric gave slightly under your weight, not enough to sink significantly, but enough to feel unstable. You had to maintain balance while also looking and feeling for the mouse, trying to spot telltale bulges or movements in the fabric. When you thought you'd located the mouse, you'd pounce, trying to capture them through the fabric, usually just tapping the spot rather than actually grabbing, since grabbing could be rough and the fabric might tear. The climax of many parachute sessions was the popcorn game. The teacher dumped dozens of smaller balls, tennis balls, foam balls, anything that would bounce, onto the parachute. Sometimes there were so many balls that the parachute's colors were barely visible underneath them. The instruction was simple. Shake the parachute as vigorously as possible to make the balls pop like popcorn kernels. The resulting chaos was spectacular. Balls flew everywhere, bouncing high into the air, ricocheting off each other, escaping the parachute's confines to roll across the gym floor. The sound was incredible, a cacophony of balls bouncing on fabric, balls hitting each other, balls landing on the wooden floor beyond the parachute's edge. Students shrieked and laughed as balls flew near them, occasionally having to duck as a particularly enthusiastic bounce sent a ball sailing towards someone's head. The visual spectacle matched the audio chaos. Dozens of balls in motion simultaneously, each following its own trajectory, rising and falling with the parachute's waves, creating a dynamic, ever-changing pattern of color and movement. Some balls bounced so high they nearly reached the gymnasium ceiling. Others never left the parachute, rolling in circles or valleys in the fabric. The combination of the parachute's colors and the ball's movement created a sensory overload in the best possible way. Too much to track, overwhelming in its complexity, purely exhilarating. The physical exertion of the popcorn game exceeded previous activities. Making the balls bounce required serious effort, vigorous shaking that engaged shoulders, arms, and core muscles. After several minutes, your arms burned with fatigue, but the energy of the activity carried you through. Sweat formed on foreheads, breath came harder, but no one wanted to stop. The combination of physical effort and pure fun created a state of flow, where you weren't thinking about anything except the immediate experience of making those balls fly. Eventually, the teacher would call time, and the parachute activities would end. Letting go of the handle felt strange after holding it for so long. Your hands shaped to the grip, slightly cramped from the repetitive clenching. The parachute would be gathered up, folded, a process that required cooperation as everyone helped compress the large fabric back into something manageable and returned to its storage bag. As the parachute disappeared back into the equipment closet, it felt like magic disappearing, like the normal gym class reality reasserting itself. But the memory remained. That night at home, your arms might be slightly sore from all the shaking and lifting. Your mind might replay moments, the mushroom forming above you, a particularly impressive ball bounce, the laughter of classmates, the colors swirling. Parachute Day stood out in memory because it engaged all the senses simultaneously and created shared joy in a way few other gym class activities could match. It was pure, uncomplicated fun, and for one class period, that was enough. If Parachute Day represented communal joy and cooperation, rope climbing represented individual challenge and personal triumph or defeat. The rope hung from the gymnasium ceiling, often 20 or 25 feet high, a thick manila or synthetic line that seemed to stretch upward forever when you stood at its base looking up. The rope's presence in the gymnasium was constant, unlike the parachute that emerged only on special days. The rope, or multiple ropes, if the school had them, hung there always, a vertical reminder of challenge and height. When not in use, the rope just hung straight down, still and silent, sometimes with knots tied at intervals, sometimes smooth and unknotted. Looking at it from across the gym, it seemed innocuous, just a line hanging down. But when rope climbing day arrived and you stood at its base preparing to climb, it transformed into something formidable. The rope's physical properties became intimately familiar to anyone who climbed it. The thickness, usually 1.5 to 2 inches in diameter, meant it filled your grip, your fingers barely able to close around it. The texture varied depending on the material. Traditional manila ropes had a coarse, fibrous texture, almost scratchy against your palms. The fibers had a slight give when you gripped tightly. Compressing under pressure, synthetic ropes were smoother, sometimes slightly slick, without the natural texture of manila fibers. The smell of the rope was distinctive. Manila ropes had an organic, slightly musty smell, the scent of natural fibers and whatever treatments had been applied to prevent rot and deterioration. Synthetic ropes smelled more like plastic or nylon, an industrial scent. Both types of rope carried the accumulated scent of years of use. The sweat from thousands of hands, the dust and air of the gymnasium, the oils from skin transferred through countless grips. Preparing to climb meant approaching the rope, standing at its base, and reaching up to grab it at the highest point you could reach from the floor. The rope was room temperature or slightly cooler, the surface neither warm nor cold to the touch. The teacher's instructions echoed in your mind. Use your legs, not just your arms. Wrap the rope around one foot and clamp it with the other. Pull with your arms while pushing with your legs. Don't look down. The moment of beginning the climb was significant. You gripped the rope high, then jumped slightly to lift your feet off the ground, now hanging entirely from your handhold. Your body weight pulled downward, gravity asserting itself immediately. Your grip tightened instinctively, hands clenching around the rope. The texture pressed into your palms, each fiber or strand making an impression. You could feel your heartbeat in your hands where they gripped the rope, pulse throbbing against the pressure. Wrapping your feet around the rope was the first technical challenge. You needed to catch the rope with one foot, wrapping it around the arch or ankle, then clamp down with the other foot, sandwiching the rope between your feet and lower legs. Getting this foot grip right made the difference between efficient climbing and exhausting struggle. A good foot grip allowed you to stand up on the rope, taking weight off your arms and hands. A poor grip meant the rope slipped through and you remained hanging by arm strength alone. The first upward movement required coordination. Reach higher with your hands, pull yourself up a few inches, release the foot grip, bring your feet higher, re-establish the foot grip, then stand up on that grip while reaching even higher with your hands. The motion wasn't natural. It had to be learned and practiced. Many students, especially on first attempts, tried to climb using only their arms, pulling themselves up hand over hand without effectively using their legs. This technique exhausted the arms within seconds, and progress stopped after a few feet of climbing. As you climbed higher, everything intensified. The rope began to sway slightly with your movements, introducing instability. Each time you pulled yourself up, the rope swung gently from side to side or twisted slightly, requiring balance and grip adjustment. The swaying increased as you climbed higher, the rope's length above you decreasing, while the length below you increased, changing the rope's physics. Your hands began to hurt. The continuous gripping, supporting your weight, created pressure and friction. The rope's texture, whether rough manila or smooth synthetic, dragged against your palms with each hand shift. Heat built up from the friction. If you had to slide your hands along the rope to reposition rather than releasing and regripping, the friction intensified dramatically. The rope fibers or material scraped against your skin, creating burning sensations that progressed from uncomfortable to painful, to potentially creating blisters or rope burns. The physical exertion of climbing grew with each upward movement. Your arms, even with a good technique using your legs, had to pull your body weight repeatedly. Your forearms burned with effort, muscles fatigued from sustained gripping, your shoulders strained, deltoids and trapezius muscles working to pull and stabilize, your core engaged to keep your body position stable on the swaying rope. Even your legs, if you were using proper technique, worked hard. Quadriceps and calves engaging to push you upward with each standing motion on the foot grip. Breathing became labored. The exertion demanded oxygen, and you found yourself breathing hard, sometimes gasping. But breathing was complicated by the sustained effort. You couldn't pause and rest easily like you might during running or other exercises. Each moment of rest meant just hanging there, arms supporting full body weight, which was its own form of exhausting. The choice became whether to push through the fatigue and continue climbing, or to give up and descend. The psychological challenge equaled or exceeded the physical. The fear that emerged as you climbed wasn't irrational. You were genuinely high off the ground, with nothing but air beneath you if you fell. The rational part of your brain knew there were mats below, knew that falling wouldn't likely result in serious injury, knew that thousands of students had climbed this same rope without disaster. But the primal, instinctive part of your brain registered only heightened danger. Looking down was universally acknowledged as a mistake, yet it was hard to resist. Glancing down, you saw the gym floor receding beneath you, looking harder and further away than you remembered. Classmates below looked small. The mats that were supposed to cushion any fall looked inadequate. The visual reminder of height could trigger vertigo or panic, making continued climbing difficult or impossible. Looking up wasn't necessarily better. The ceiling still stretched above you, the distance remaining seeming impossibly far. Doubt crept in. Could you make it? Were your arms strong enough? What if you got stuck halfway, too tired to continue up but afraid to go down? The rope seemed endless, a vertical challenge that had no mercy and offered no shortcuts. The moment of decision came somewhere in the middle. You climbed high enough that returning to the start felt like admitting defeat, but the top remained distant and difficult. Your arms burned with fatigue. Your hands hurt from gripping. Your breath came hard. This was the moment when you discovered something about yourself, whether you could push through discomfort and fear, or whether you'd give up and descend. Continuing upward from this point required mental strength as much as physical. You had to override the signals your body was sending, the fatigue, the pain, the fear. Each additional upward movement was a conscious choice, a decision to reach higher despite everything suggesting you should stop. The rope became less of a physical challenge and more of a mental one. Could you force yourself to continue when every instinct suggested stopping? For those who persevered, the final approach to the ceiling brought both excitement and exhaustion. The ceiling approached, the structural beams and rafters becoming visible in detail. The mounting point where the rope was anchored came into view, usually a metal bracket or eye bolt secured to a beam. Sometimes teachers hung a bell at the top that you could ring to prove you'd made it. Sometimes they just told you to touch the ceiling or a specific beam. Reaching the top was triumph. Your hand touched the ceiling or grabbed the bell rope, and in that moment, all the pain and effort became worthwhile. The view from this height was remarkable. The entire gymnasium spread below you, the perspective completely different from the ground. Everything looked small and far away. The achievement was undeniable and witnessed. Everyone below could see you'd made it to the top. The pride was immediate and overwhelming. But the challenge wasn't over. You still had to descend, and descending presented its own difficulties. The instinct was to rush down, to escape the height quickly. But rushing meant losing control, meant sliding down the rope rather than climbing down properly. Sliding created intense friction, rope burns developing in seconds as the material dragged across your palms. The burning sensation of skin scraped raw by a rapid descent was worse than anything experienced during the climb up. Controlled descent required continuing to use the technique. Foot grip, hand positioning, lowering yourself in stages rather than sliding. But your arms were exhausted from the climb up, your hands hurt, your legs trembled with fatigue. Maintaining control while descending was difficult, requiring sustained concentration and effort when you had little of either remaining. The ground below beckoned, promising rest, but the distance down seemed as far as the distance up had been. Finally, your feet touched the mat, then the gym floor. Solid ground beneath you felt wonderful after the swaying instability of the rope. You let go of the rope, and your hands cramped immediately, fingers locked in claw shapes from the sustained gripping. Opening your hands hurt, blood rushing back into tissue that had been compressed. Your palms were red, possibly scraped, definitely sore. Looking at them, you could see the rope's pattern imprinted on your skin, the marks of fibers or strands where you'd gripped tightest. Your arms felt like jelly, muscles trembling with exhaustion. Your breath came hard, heart pounding from exertion and adrenaline. Sweat covered your face and dampened your shirt. But overwhelming all the physical discomfort was a sense of accomplishment. You'd done it. You'd reached the top. The rope had been conquered. For students who didn't make it to the top, the experience was different but no less memorable. Climbing partway and then descending brought mixed emotions. Disappointment at not reaching the top, but also recognition of having tried, having pushed yourself as far as you could. The teacher's response mattered enormously here. Good teachers praised the effort, celebrated personal progress, encouraged trying again another day. Poor teachers displayed disappointment or compared struggling students to more successful ones, turning difficulty into humiliation. Some students never could climb the rope or never got far up it. Physical limitations, body weight, arm strength, fear of heights, could make rope climbing impossible or nearly so. For these students, rope climbing day was ordeal rather than opportunity, a public demonstration of inadequacy. Watching classmates succeed where you struggled created feelings of shame and exclusion that lasted long after gym class ended. Yet for many students, the rope climb became a defining gym class memory, whether they reached the top or not. The rope represented challenge in pure form. No team to carry you, no luck involved, just you and gravity and height and your own capabilities. Success brought genuine pride. Failure brought motivation to try again or acceptance of limitations. Either way, the rope climb taught lessons about persistence, about pushing through difficulty, about knowing your own strength and limits. Where rope climbing was individual and vertical, dodgeball was communal and chaotic. A game that transformed the gym into a battlefield where rubber balls flew like missiles and survival required quick reflexes, strategic thinking, and sometimes just luck. The game began with setup. 2 teams, one on each half of the court, separated by a center line that no one could cross. The balls, usually 4 to 6 of them, were lined up along the center line. At the whistle, players from both teams rushed forward to grab balls, retreating to their own territory before launching their attacks. This opening rush set the tone for everything that followed. Frantic, competitive, slightly dangerous. The moment the whistle blew, the gymnasium erupted in sound and motion. Students sprinted toward the center line, trying to reach the balls first. The squeaking of sneakers on the polished floor intensified as 20 or 30 students ran simultaneously. Bodies collided as players reached for the same ball, bumping and pushing in the scramble. Someone grabbed a ball and immediately backpedaled to safety, while winding up to throw. Someone else snatched a ball and turned to run, cradling it like a football. In seconds, the orderly lines of 2 teams devolved into chaos. The sensory experience of dodgeball was overwhelming. Visually, you had to track multiple balls simultaneously, while also watching the movements of opponents and teammates. Balls flew constantly, arcing through the air from different directions. You learned to use peripheral vision, to sense movement without directly looking, to anticipate throws based on the thrower's body language. The colored jerseys or shirts distinguishing teams helped identify friend from foe in the chaos. The sound was constant and varied. Balls bouncing off the floor made sharp, resonant thuds. Balls impacting the wall behind you created hollow booms. The worst sound was the solid thwack of a ball hitting flesh, either your own or someone nearby. That sound was meaty and unmistakable, combining the ball's rubber striking solid mass with the grunt or cry of the person hit. Students shouted constantly, warning teammates, celebrating hits, protesting close calls, trash-talking opponents. The physical sensation of being hit by a dodgeball varied depending on the ball type, the thrower's strength, where you were hit, and how prepared you were for impact. Rubber playground balls, the traditional dodgeball, carried significant force. A hard throw striking your torso or legs created a stinging impact that radiated outward from the point of contact. The pain wasn't severe, but was definitely unpleasant, especially if hit in sensitive areas. The impact left a red mark that lasted for minutes or hours, a visible reminder of being eliminated. Being hit in the face was particularly unpleasant, even though many schools prohibited headshots. An accidental ball to the face wasn't just painful. It was shocking, disorienting, sometimes embarrassing. Your eyes watered involuntarily. Your nose might bleed if hit directly. Your ears rang if hit on the side of the head. Face hits occasionally resulted in injuries, bloody noses, fat lips, bruised cheekbones. Even when rules forbade head throws, accidents happened, either from poor aim or from balls deflecting off other targets. The introduction of foam balls in later decades changed dodgeball's physical dynamics. Foam balls still stung on impact, but much less so than rubber. They were lighter, slower, easier to catch. They made the game more accessible and less intimidating for less athletic or more fearful students. But they also changed the game's character. Some of the danger disappeared, and with it, some of the excitement. Dodgeball purists mourned the loss of the traditional rubber ball, even while acknowledging the safety benefits of foam. The strategic elements of dodgeball emerged as you gained experience. Raw throwing power mattered, but smart play mattered more. Throwing immediately after retrieving a ball made you predictable. Waiting, faking throws, catching opponents off guard proved more effective. Targeting specific opponents, the weak throwers, the poor catchers, the distracted, was more efficient than throwing at the most skilled opponents who'd likely catch or dodge. The catch mechanic added depth and drama. A ball thrown at you wasn't just a threat, it was an opportunity. If you caught it before it hit the ground, the thrower was out, not you. Catching also sometimes allowed an eliminated teammate to return, depending on the rules variant being played. The risk-reward calculation happened in split seconds. Should you dodge, safe but passive, or attempt to catch, risky but potentially game-changing? Catching a dodgeball thrown hard required courage and timing. You had to resist the instinct to flinch or turn away, instead moving toward the ball with hands positioned correctly. The impact of the ball hitting your hands was jarring, the momentum trying to knock your hands apart. You had to absorb the impact, bringing the ball into your chest to secure it. A successful catch felt incredible. You turned defense into offense, eliminated a thrower, possibly saved yourself and helped your team. The ball was solid and slightly heavy in your hands, proof of your accomplishment. Failed catch attempts were painful and embarrassing. Misjudging the ball's trajectory meant it hit your fingers or hands at awkward angles, sometimes jamming fingers or bending them backward. Bobbling a catch and dropping the ball before securing it meant you were out despite your attempt. The worst scenario was having the ball hit your hands, bounce off, and then hit your body. You were still eliminated, but you demonstrated incompetence in the attempt. Dodging was an art form. The basic dodge was simply moving out of the ball's path, sidestepping, backing up, ducking. But advanced dodging incorporated jumps, twists, and even matrix-style leans. The satisfaction of seeing a ball pass close by, knowing it would have hit you if you hadn't moved, created a rush of adrenaline. Multiple balls coming simultaneously required impossible choices. Dodge one, get hit by another. Sometimes the best strategy was pure luck, moving randomly and hoping. The game's social dynamics were complex and sometimes brutal. Strong throwers became targets, teams focusing fire to eliminate them early. Weak players were targeted because they were easy outs. Some students used teammates as shields, hiding behind them to avoid being hit. Alliances formed and dissolved within single games. The last player standing on each team faced intense pressure, everyone watching as they fought to survive or secure victory. Being eliminated meant sitting out, watching from the sidelines or bleachers. This was perhaps dodgeball's most controversial aspect. Students eliminated early might sit out for the entire game, getting minimal exercise and participation. The embarrassment of being first out was real, particularly for students who struggled athletically. They sat there, visible reminders of defeat, while the game continued without them. But elimination also created drama and narrative. The game's progress was visible. Teams shrinking, star players falling, unlikely heroes emerging. Comebacks were possible if your rules allowed eliminated players to return. The final showdown between the last players on each side became epic. Everyone watching, cheering, invested in the outcome. The physical exhaustion of dodgeball came not from sustained effort, but from constant explosive movements. You'd stand relatively still, then suddenly sprint to dodge. You'd throw with maximum force, engaging shoulders and core. You'd jump, dive, twist, all in quick bursts. This stop and start activity was more tiring than it seemed, adrenaline masking fatigue until the game ended and you realized you were breathing hard, sweating, muscles trembling. The emotional intensity matched the physical. Dodgeball triggered fight or flight responses. Actual threat existed, balls flying at you, impact inevitable if you didn't react. Success triggered triumph. Failure triggered disappointment or frustration. Conflicts emerged. Disputes over whether someone was hit, whether a catch was valid, whether throws were too hard or headshots intentional. These conflicts could escalate beyond the game, grudges forming, friendships tested. Yet despite, or perhaps because of, all this intensity, dodgeball remained enormously popular. Students looked forward to it, talked about games afterward, developed skills and reputations as dodgeball players. The game was simple enough to learn immediately, but complex enough to reward practice and strategy. It was exciting, visceral, engaging in ways that more structured sports sometimes weren't. And it created stories, the amazing catch, the impossible dodge, the comeback victory, the humiliating defeat that became part of class lore. Some gym equipment achieved beloved status not because of their pedagogical value, but because they were simply fun. Scooter boards topped this list, wheeled platforms that served no practical purpose beyond allowing children to zoom across gym floors in various positions, feeling fast and slightly reckless. The scooter board itself was deceptively simple, a rectangular platform, usually about 12 by 12 inches, made of wood or hard plastic, with 4 wheels mounted underneath. Some models had handles on the sides. Others were just flat boards. The wheels were typically hard plastic or rubber, designed to roll smoothly on polished gym floors, but not on rougher surfaces. The boards could support significant weight, allowing even adults to use them, though they were designed for children. The first time you sat on a scooter board and pushed off, the sensation was immediately addictive. The wheels offered minimal resistance, and the smooth gym floor provided ideal conditions. A few pushes with your hands, and you were gliding, moving faster than walking, the floor sliding by beneath you. The slight rumble of wheels on wood vibrated through the board into your body. Wind, or the air displacement from your movement, brushed your face. The perspective from sitting height made everything look different. The gym seemed larger, the ceiling higher, other students taller. The classic scooter board position was sitting cross-legged, propelling yourself with hand pushes against the floor. This position was comfortable and provided good control. You could spin by pushing with one hand while pulling with the other. You could stop by dragging your feet. You could build surprising speed with sustained pushing, the gym becoming a blur as you raced from one end to the other. Lying on your stomach transformed the experience. Now you were closer to the floor, the perspective even more dramatic. You propelled yourself by pulling with your hands or pushing with your feet, Superman style. This position made you more aerodynamic and seemed faster, though control was harder. Steering required shifting your weight and using hand drags. Stopping was more difficult. Dragging your toes created friction, but you had less leverage from this position. The brave or reckless tried lying on their backs, staring at the ceiling while moving blind. This position was disorienting and slightly dangerous. You couldn't see where you were going. Collisions were inevitable. But the experience of moving while looking up created a strange sensation, like flying or falling upward. Some students got so comfortable on scooters that they could navigate while looking at the ceiling, steering by memory and sound. The physical sensation of scooter boarding engaged your entire body differently than running or walking. Your core muscles engaged constantly to maintain balance on the unstable, wheeling platform. Your arms got a workout from propelling yourself. Your spatial awareness sharpened as you avoided collisions and navigated the gym's geography. The slight danger, the possibility of crashing, of wheels catching and stopping suddenly, while your body continued forward, kept you alert and engaged. The sound of scooter boards in use was distinctive and unmistakable. 30 students on scooters created a rumbling roar, the combined sound of 120 wheels rolling on the wooden floor. Individual scooters made clicking sounds as they rolled, the wheels rotating rapidly. Crashes produced louder thuds as boards and bodies collided. Students shrieked and laughed, their voices bouncing off the gymnasium's hard surfaces, amplified by excitement and adrenaline. Collisions were frequent and usually minor. Two scooters coming from different directions, neither person quite managing to avoid the other, meeting with a bump or crash. Bodies separated from boards sometimes, students tumbling across the floor while their scooters continued rolling without them. The gym floor was smooth and relatively forgiving. Falling didn't usually cause injuries beyond minor scrapes or bruises, but the potential for hurt existed, particularly with 30 students wheeling around in relative chaos. Relay races with scooters provided structure to what otherwise might devolve into mayhem. Teams lined up, and one person at a time scooted from one end of the gym to the other and back, tagging the next teammate. The specific requirements varied: sitting, lying, spinning in circles, weaving through cones, but the basic competitive format remained constant. These races rewarded speed but also control, as purely racing without steering led to crashes and time lost. Scooter hockey elevated scooters from simple fun to actual sport. Students sat on scooters holding plastic hockey sticks, using them to hit a puck or ball toward goals, while simultaneously propelling their scooters. The coordination required was significant: steering, moving, and controlling the puck all simultaneously. Collisions increased dramatically as players converged on the puck, scooters bumping and tangling. Some schools prohibited scooter hockey due to injury rates. Others embraced it as a legitimate gym class activity. The danger of scooter boards was part of their appeal, particularly for boys and risk-taking students. The possibility of crashing, of going too fast to control, of attempting tricks that might fail. This slight edge of danger made scooters more exciting than safer activities. Teachers had to balance allowing fun with preventing injuries, often setting strict rules about speed, traffic patterns, and prohibited behaviors. Injuries from scooters were usually minor but common. Pinched fingers were the most frequent. Wheels running over hands, scooters colliding and catching fingers between boards. These injuries hurt intensely for a few minutes, but rarely caused lasting damage. Scraped knees and elbows from falls were also common. The more serious injuries occurred during collisions. Bloody noses from face-to-face crashes, bruised ribs from running a board into someone's side, occasional concussions from students falling and hitting their heads. The ubiquitous red rubber playground ball deserves mention as perhaps the most versatile piece of gym equipment. These balls, typically 8.5 or 13 inches in diameter, made of red rubber, slightly underinflated for better grip, were used for dozens of games: kickball, dodgeball, foursquare, handball, and countless other activities all used this same ball. Its familiar red color was iconic, the color of playground and gym class itself. The ball's texture was slightly rough, providing grip. The smell was pure rubber, industrial and chemical. The bounce was predictable and reliable. Not too high, not too dead. Just right for most applications. The ball's slight softness, compared to fully inflated balls, made it easier to catch and less painful when it hit you, though it still carried plenty of force. These balls were nearly indestructible. They could be kicked, thrown, sat on, and generally abused for years before needing replacement. Jump ropes, both individual and long group ropes, were often underappreciated despite their effectiveness and versatility. A simple rope could provide serious exercise, develop coordination, and accommodate various skill levels. Individual jumping built cardiovascular fitness and footwork. Double Dutch and other group rope activities developed timing and rhythm. Jump rope competitions pushed skilled jumpers to perform complex tricks and patterns. The physical sensation of jumping rope was unique. The rhythm of repeated jumping, the burn in calves and feet, the coordination of hands and feet working together. The rope whistling through the air created a rhythmic whooshing sound. Hitting your feet or ankles with the rope stung sharply, a punishing reminder of missed timing. Developing speed and skill with a jump rope brought satisfaction. The rope becoming an extension of your body, moving with precision and grace. Hula hoops offered individual challenge and creative expression. Some students could keep multiple hoops spinning simultaneously on different body parts. Others invented tricks, walking while hooping, changing the hoop's direction, tossing and catching while maintaining the spin. The plastic hoops were lightweight and brightly colored, producing a satisfying whooshing sound as they rotated. The sensation of the hoop spinning around your waist or other body part created a continuous light pressure, a rhythmic reminder of motion. Each piece of equipment had its champions, students who particularly loved that item and looked forward to its appearance. The variety of equipment meant that different students could excel at different activities. Someone terrible at dodgeball might be amazing on scooters. Someone who couldn't climb the rope might dominate at hula hooping. This variety gave more students chances to experience success and enjoyment, making gym class more inclusive despite its often competitive nature. Beyond the major activities and specialized equipment, gym class was filled with smaller moments that collectively created the experience. These mundane, everyday occurrences often became as memorable as the games themselves, particularly when viewed through the lens of nostalgia. The process of being divided into teams was fraught with social meaning. The most common method, captain's choosing, created a public hierarchy of athletic ability and social status. Two students, usually the most athletic or popular, were designated captains. They alternated picking teammates from the group of remaining students. Being picked early meant validation. Being picked last meant public humiliation. Everyone understood the system, and everyone knew where they stood. Standing in line waiting to be chosen, you experienced a particular form of anxiety, hope mixed with dread. Maybe you'd be picked earlier than expected, escaping the bottom tier. But as more names were called and yours wasn't among them, reality set in. The pool of remaining students shrank. Soon, only a handful remained, and then just a few, and finally, just you, and maybe one other person. The captain, who picked last, often showed reluctance, sometimes making comments that added insult to injury. Alternative team division methods, having people count off by twos or assigning teams randomly, spared feelings, but removed the social information the choosing process provided. Students knew who was good and who wasn't, based on countless previous choosing sessions. This knowledge shaped friendships, self-perception, and willingness to participate. Being consistently picked last taught students they weren't good at sports, a lesson that affected their relationship with physical activity for years or even life. The water fountain rush at the end of class represented temporary chaos and opportunity. Everyone was thirsty from exertion, and the water fountain, usually a single fountain somewhere in or near the gym, became precious resource over which students competed. The line formed quickly, but pushing and cutting were common. The water was always colder and more refreshing than water drunk at any other time, probably due to genuine thirst, but perhaps also due to psychological association. Drinking from the fountain was an art. Pressing the button while simultaneously positioning your mouth to catch the arc of water required coordination. The water pressure varied, sometimes a weak dribble, sometimes a forceful spray that hit the back of your throat or shot past your mouth entirely. The fountain's metal spout had a particular taste, slightly metallic, combined with whatever disinfectant was used for cleaning. The water itself tasted of school plumbing. Not bad exactly, but distinctly different from water at home. Waiting in line for activities was a significant portion of gym class time. Relay races, rope climbing, any activity where students took turns individually meant that most students spent most of class time waiting. This waiting took place standing in line, sitting on bleachers, or sitting on the floor in designated spots. The boredom of waiting was relieved by social interaction, chatting with friends, watching other students perform, sometimes getting in trouble for excessive talking or movement. The gymnasium's acoustics made every sound dramatic and important. A sneaker squeaking on the floor could be heard across the entire space. Conversations echoed, making it difficult to have private discussions. The teacher's whistle cut through all other noise, a sharp, piercing sound that meant stop immediately and pay attention. The whistle was authority, command, and structure, all embodied in one shrill note. Sitting on the bleachers had its own particular experience. The hard wood or metal seats were uncomfortable for extended sitting. The height, even the lowest bleacher row, was elevated off the floor, provided a different perspective on the gym. Conversations with neighbors came more easily when sitting, not facing each other, but rather sitting side by side, facing the gym floor. These bleacher conversations covered everything: school gossip, weekend plans, complaints about the current activity, jokes and laughter. Being chosen to help the teacher set up or put away equipment was a special privilege. Helping meant missing some activity time, but it also meant being trusted, being important, being special. Carrying equipment from the closet to the gym floor or returning it afterward was simple physical work, but felt meaningful. You got to see inside the equipment closet, that treasure trove of balls and ropes and other items. You might get to talk with a teacher one-on-one, away from the group. The end of class routine had a calming quality. After the activity's intensity, the teacher's whistle signaled that the activity was over. Everyone stopped, breathing hard, sweating, tired. Instructions came to return equipment, to line up, or to sit down for a brief cool-down. Sometimes the teacher led stretches, everyone following along with simple movements to prevent muscle soreness. These final minutes felt different. The activity was done, the pressure was off, and the transition back to regular school was beginning. Walking back to the locker room or to the next class meant re-entering the normal school world. Your body was warm from exercise, heart rate still elevated, sometimes still breathing hard. Sweat cooled on your skin, sometimes creating a chill. Your gym clothes clung damply. The smell of the gymnasium lingered on you. That combination of rubber and sweat and floor wax. You carried gym class with you into the next period, a physical reminder of the experience, even as you sat down at a desk to focus on academic subjects. Decades later, many adults can remember their gym class experiences with remarkable clarity. The smell of the gymnasium, the sound of sneakers squeaking, the feeling of gripping a parachute handle, the fear and triumph of climbing a rope. These memories persist when memories of math classes or history lessons have faded. Why does gym class create such lasting impressions? Part of the answer lies in the physical nature of the experiences. Physical activity creates stronger memories than passive learning. When your body is engaged, when you're moving and exerting yourself, when you're experiencing physical sensations, joy or pain, triumph or embarrassment, those experiences encode more deeply in memory. The multisensory nature of gym class, engaging sight, sound, touch, smell, even taste, the water fountain, the blood from a split lip, created rich, detailed memories that text-based learning rarely matched. Emotions strengthened these memories. Gym class triggered powerful emotions: excitement, fear, pride, shame, joy, frustration. These emotions weren't mild or abstract. They were immediate and intense. The adrenaline of dodgeball, the fear of the rope climb, the pure fun of parachute day, the humiliation of being picked last. These emotional experiences created memories that lasted because they mattered. They affected how you felt about yourself, your body, your capabilities, your place in the social hierarchy. The social dimension of gym class also contributed to lasting memories. Unlike academic classes where students worked individually, gym class was inherently social. You were divided into teams, competed against classmates, relied on partners, were publicly evaluated. Your physical abilities and limitations were on display for everyone to see. This public nature meant that gym class experiences affected your reputation and social standing. The student who excelled at sports gained the status. The student who struggled lost it. These social stakes made gym class memorable in ways that private failures or successes in academic work weren't. Gym class also represented freedom from the normal constraints of school. For a brief period, you weren't sitting at a desk, reading or writing or listening to lectures. You were moving, playing, being physical in ways that most of school didn't allow. This permission to be active, to be loud, to compete and play, even though it came with its own rules and limitations, felt like liberation. The contrast with regular classroom time made gym class stand out. The equipment itself became symbolic. The parachute represented cooperation and joy. The rope represented challenge and achievement. Dodgeballs represented competition and conflict. Scooters represented fun and slight danger. These objects were simple, but they carried meaning beyond their physical properties. They were tools for experiences, props in the dramas that played out twice a week in the gymnasium. For some people, gym class memories are predominantly positive. They remember the fun, the games, the physical joy of movement and competition. They remember triumphs, making it to the top of the rope, catching a crucial ball, winning a close game. They remember parachute day and scooter day with pure nostalgia, longing to recapture that simple fun. These people often maintain positive relationships with physical activity throughout their lives, seeing exercise and sports as enjoyable rather than obligatory. For others, gym class memories are mixed or negative. They remember embarrassment, inadequacy, exclusion. They remember being picked last, being hit too hard with dodgeballs, failing at rope climbing in front of classmates. They remember teachers who were insensitive or actively cruel, who use physical education to humiliate rather than educate. These negative experiences often created lasting aversion to exercise and sports, associations that persisted into adulthood. Most people's memories likely fall somewhere between these extremes. Some good days, some bad days, some activities enjoyed, others dreaded. The complexity of these memories reflects the complexity of the experience itself. Gym class was never just one thing. It was cooperative and competitive, fun and frightening, inclusive and exclusionary, skill building and humiliating, all depending on the day, the activity, the teacher, and the student. The universal nature of gym class experiences created shared cultural touchstones. Almost everyone who attended American schools from the 1960s onward had gym class. While specific details varied by school and era, the basic elements remained consistent. This shared experience meant that adults could bond over gym class memories, recognizing their own experiences in others' stories. The parachute, the rope, the dodgeball, the scooter. These common elements transcended individual differences and created collective memory. Looking back on gym class from adulthood, perspectives often shift. The activities that seemed so important at the time, winning at dodgeball, climbing the rope, being picked first, lose their significance. The social hierarchies that felt permanent dissolved as students left school and found other measures of worth. The physical challenges that seemed impossible become touchstones for understanding personal growth and capability. some aspects of traditional gym class have disappeared or diminished in modern schools. Budget cuts have reduced or eliminated PE programs in many districts. Concerns about safety and inclusivity have changed activities and approaches. New technologies and pedagogies have altered how physical education is taught and experienced. The gym class that today's children experience often differs significantly from the gym class their parents or grandparents remember. Yet the core purpose remains consistent: teaching children about physical activity, giving them opportunities to move and play, helping them develop fitness and skills. The specific games and equipment may change, but the fundamental goal of engaging children's bodies and helping them develop healthy relationships with physical activity continues. The nostalgia many adults feel for gym class, particularly for special days like Parachute Day or Scooter Day, reflects longing for simpler times and uncomplicated joy. As adults, we rarely have opportunities for that kind of unstructured, playful physical activity. Our exercise is purposeful. Fitness classes, gym memberships, training programs, rather than purely fun. The memory of grabbing a parachute handle with classmates, making a giant mushroom, and laughing as balls bounced across colored fabric represents a kind of joy that adult life rarely provides. In the end, gym class mattered not because of what it taught about sports or fitness, though those lessons had value, but because of what it taught about yourself and others. You learned something about your own capabilities and limitations, about pushing through difficulty or accepting what you couldn't change. You learned about competition and cooperation, about being part of a team, about handling victory and defeat. You learned where you fit in the social hierarchy. For better or worse, you experienced your body as something more than just a brain carrier, as something capable, fallible or strong, vulnerable, alive. Those double doors at the end of the hallway were a threshold to experiences that shaped you. The smell, the sounds, the physical sensations, the emotions, all of it combined to create memories that last a lifetime. Whether your gym class memories are fond or painful or mixed, they're part of your story, part of the shared experience of growing up in American schools during a particular era. The parachute sits folded in a storage closet now, in schools that still have them. The rope has been removed from many gymnasiums, though it hangs still in others. Dodgeballs rest in equipment closets, waiting for the next game, or sitting banned and unused. Scooter boards gather dust or roll across gym floors, depending on the school. These simple objects, fabric, rope, rubber, wheels, were tools for something larger than themselves. They were part of childhood, part of education, part of the complex, challenging, joyful, painful experience of growing up. And that's why we remember them.